Hello, and welcome to Conversations with Matt. Today, we're going to begin our discussion of verses 3 through 8. This section is known as the introduction to the letter, and typically, introductions were meant to do two things. One, they were meant to introduce the main ideas one would see in the rest of the letter, and two, soften the audience so they would be willing to listen to the author. We see both of these here. Paul is both introducing the main themes that we'll be looking at later, though only in their most basic form, and talking about positive things he knows about the Colossians in order to start the letter off on a good note. Paul begins both of these by opening with a theme of thanksgiving. It can easily seem like Thanksgiving is just one of those nice Christian things that doesn't mean very much, and Paul is saying it just to be nice. Of course, if you've read much of Paul, especially a letter like Galatians, you know that Paul isn't shy about saying what's on his mind, and it's possible that he may not have been the most diplomatic person who has ever lived. Rather than simply being a nice thing, though, Thanksgiving actually plays an important part in the letter, even if you wouldn't necessarily see it at first glance. So let's take a look at how Paul uses Thanksgiving throughout the letter. There are 7 places in the letter where Paul speaks of thanksgiving or thankfulness, and all of them are in significant places. The first one is here in chapter 1, verse 3. This is where Paul introduces the main themes of the letter. The next one is in chapter 1, verse 12, where Paul reminds the Colossians to give thanks to the Father because he has qualified them to receive an inheritance as saints and transfer them from the domain of darkness into the kingdom of his beloved Son. So those things sound pretty good. Next, you find an occurrence of thankfulness in 2:7. This is the thematic statement that we talked about in the last episode. This is the statement that governs the rest of what's going to happen in the letter and represents the main things that Paul is trying to tell the Colossians. And here, the Colossians are reminded to be thankful for what has been done on their behalf. Then we have 4 occurrences of thankfulness in a row: 3:15, 3:16, 3:17, and 4:2. Technically, the household code comes between 3:17 and 4:2, but remember, the flow of thought goes straight from 3:17 to 4:2, because you can read these verses one right after another, so really, these 4 instances or occurrences of thankfulness come one right after another. Now, all 4 of these are generally about remembering to be thankful to God as you consider your actions towards others in the church. And if we went no further than that point, we would have enough to keep us busy for quite a while. Because it's really not very easy to keep in mind how much God has done for you when there's somebody right in front of you who is really ticking you off. However, there is a bigger point to be made here, and I want to take a minute to look at it. All of these verses, except perhaps verse 3, are related to Christian praxis. Praxis, Praxis, is a good word to learn. It refers to the practical living, the daily life, and the acts that one does. It's the opposite of theory, but it's based on theory. The book of Acts in the New Testament, in Greek, is praxis of the apostles. All throughout the New Testament, we see theology, theory, talking all about sorts of things related to the interaction of God and man. In praxis of the apostles, we see what they did. Theology and praxis are the 2 big parts of human life in relation to God: what we believe and what we do. And thanksgiving is what connects theology and praxis. What that means is that Thanksgiving is a beginning point rather than an end point. It's not merely the polite response after, say, receiving a gift, though it is that. It is the beginning of the moral life. Our praxis, our actions, the way we live should begin with thanksgiving. Our actions should be taken while remembering what has been done on our behalf. Thanksgiving, therefore, is the answer to the question, why would we want to live a moral life? We will address the question, why these particular actions, in talking about how to live when we get to chapter 3. But here, with Thanksgiving, we find an answer to the question, why bother living according to a set of moral values at all? The answer is central to the theology of the letter and speaks to the relationship between God and man. God has done something through Jesus Christ on man's behalf. Man is to be thankful for what has been done for him. As a result of being thankful, man should live differently. In other words, his praxis changes. The only problem with Thanksgiving is that we're all pretty bad at being thankful. And it's really not easy to be thankful when so many things go wrong in our lives. It often feels like nothing ever goes right, at least for us anyway. Seems to go right for everybody else. We make it worse, though, by focusing on what we don't have and what's not going the way we want it to, rather than on what we do have and what is going well. In order to balance out our focus on the negative, we would do well to take some time and focus on all the good things that we have. What we have seen today is that Thanksgiving, the thing that we're bad at, plays a central role in the relationship between God and man, and that it forms a basis for man's actions. So we should probably work on that. Now, there's no homework for this week, but before you move on to doing whatever's next on the list of things to do, take a minute and think about all the good things in your life, especially salvation, if that applies. If you believe in God, then thank God for everything that you've been given. If you don't believe in God, then simply be thankful for all the good things that you have. Every one of us could stand to focus a little less on the things we don't have and a little more on the things we do. In the next episode, we'll cover the rest of 3 through 8 and conclude the first section of Colossians.